Okay, so this is Chris and I'm summarizing oiling out. First and foremost, oiling out is to adhere to the canvas after it's been sitting 3-4 weeks and you haven't worked on it and you want the paint layer to grip. If it doesn't, you run the risk of down the road, years later, major flakes peeling off. Now, what is the time period? Can you go 3 weeks before painting on it? Could it be 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? I don't know. There. How's that as an answer? I don't know. Typically, if it's 3-4 weeks, I oil out. Paintings that I'm working on, and I know it's been, 3 months, and I haven't touched this painting, but I want to work on it, and I'm not ready yet. You just saw me, I oiled out the painting just to give me more time, so in a month I start to work on it, I can work on it. Because I don't want it to be a year later and then try to oil out. And it may be a year later. So I might oil out again 4 months from now, 3 months from now. Okay, now let's talk about the drawbacks of oiling out. So the first thing was structurally. The second thing was to bring back the vibrancy of areas that weren't beautiful. Because the gesso ground sucks the oil out of the paint and it loses its vibrancy. So you're replenishing the oil so it looked like the way you painted it that day. So now you have a fair assessment. This is what it looks like when it's wet. Now I'm putting wet paint on wet paint and it makes it shine evenly. You know, I can see, did I match or not? Okay, that's a huge thing. The third thing was like the Rembrandt, the layering of painting and glazing and painting. I was just mesmerized by the painting and the glaze and the painting and the glaze and the painting and the glaze and the depth of the brushstrokes and the variety. Because that depth and variety is part of art. It's not just about making something look pretty. It's the mark that you make makes it look fast and slow. But there's a layering effect that makes it aesthetically beautiful for a painter. So I'm after something on another playing field that I'm listening to the way your keys, that pause in the note that no one's going to pick up. I'm hoping you start to develop that in paint as well. So that's the other way, the third way that I oil out. And the reason. How did oiling out start was old masters found it was easier to blend into the wet oiling out glaze. So you'd paint on it one day, and then, you know, a couple days later or the next day, they just kind of rubbed the oil into a new area. I doubt they wiped it off and they just painted into the glaze because it was easier to soften an edge. So it is hard to soften an edge. The problem with that is you end up with so many layers of glaze in some spots and not in others. And if there's no pigment in them, I think the structural damage can be tremendous. So I think you have to be limiting with the oiling out and be careful. So, but that's how it all started, and there were benefits of the glaze. And I think when you look at Van Eyck's Altarpiece and other people who just glaze and glaze and glaze, and those paintings are beautiful, but there was a dryer in the glaze, where oil painting medium by Winsor Newton, I don't know how much dryer is in it. I know it's stand oil, but it's a medium. It's a painting medium. Painting medium is not the same as glaze. Glaze means you can put it over the surface of dry paint and it'll cure and dry on its own. Painting medium, I can take the same product and put it in oil paint. Now the oil paint has the drying medium in it, so it's going to dry because the oil painting has the dryer in it. Glaze has the dryer in it. So Galkit is a glaze I do use. I mix it with stand oil, and with the Galkit, it has a dryer in it. So when I take Galkit and put it over dry paint, that's called glazing. When I take Galkit and put it into paint, and I'm thick paint and I'm making brush strokes, then the Galkit is now called oil painting medium, not glaze. The technique is whether it's glaze or medium, not the product. So some products dry faster than others, and they show the raked lines. The longer something takes to dry, like stand oil, the lines self-flatten, or gravity pulls the line down and it flattens it out. It's gravity that's self-flattening, not the medium. It's this drying time that says, oh, I'm drying before gravity takes a hold. Or if it takes a long time to dry, well, then gravity is going to flatten it out. So knowing sand oil takes a long time to dry, you know it's going to hide your brush strokes. Now, Galkid shows brush strokes, but it dries instantly. I mean, it dries overnight. So I add it to sand oil to glaze with to give me 5 hours of glaze. So glazing is different than oil painting medium. Now, what questions did I leave out?
Is there ever a time, and I'm talking about timeline wise, that you don't do it?
Yeah. There.
Like, how long is too long?
Well, just say I've had the painting for a year, and I haven't oiled out yet, and I'm finished with the painting, and I want to varnish it. Then I'm suggesting you just take highly refined mineral spirits. We all use Gamasol. It's a fantastic product, and I'm just taking something and massaging it with a paper towel, or not a paper towel, but a rag. And I use those blue surgical rags. And I just wipe the dirt and dust off it. The next day, I varnish. I'm not going to oil out to wait 6 more months to varnish. Okay, so once it gets to a certain point, you've missed that envelope. Just like working on something. Would I wait a year to rework something? Probably not. Is there something in a book where I could find that information? How long? Well, the problem with that is, one, the drying times of all colors. So the earth tones like burnt umber and raw umber dry incredibly fast. So they're going to cure faster than alizarin, crimson, and sap green. I mean, if you mix alizarin and sap green and put it in the background for something, you could have that thing wet for a month. You do the same thing with raw umber. It's dry by the time you left that day. Another variable is how thick is that raw umber and how thick is that alizarin. The thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. So now you have different variables. Also, I have to believe when I started painting in Phoenix, things were drying. If I left my palette out overnight, it was like chiseling paint off the glass. If I left it over the weekend and at the art school out, you weren't getting it off. You just went to Home Depot and bought another sheet of glass. It was hard as a rock. In Georgia, it's not that way. So humidity has to play a role in this. Because I know even freezing my paint, I put a damp sponge over the saran wrap, and I put it in the freezer to lengthen the drying time. It's sort of like food. If you don't want it to dry out, you always put a little wet towel or something that goes in the freezer. Right, Grace? One day when you get married, you're going to need to know this. When you have leftovers and it's going in the freezer, add a little water. What other questions did I leave out? I don't think this is an exact science.
So how long do you wait?
That's why I did the painting just now, because it's been pushing 4 months, and I felt like, what if I'm 6 months and 2 years from now it turns out to be too late? So therefore, a couple months later, I decided, hey, I'm going to oil this out just to play it safe.
So let's say you've oiled it out for the last time and it's been drying. So then
6 months to varnish. 6 months. And if you don't oil out, it's 6 months to varnish.
Okay.
The last time you touch the painting, it's 6 months to varnish. My varnish of preference is Gamblins varnish, and I like the gloss. I don't like the matte. You're putting wax paper over a painting you worked so hard on, and now you're hiding it with wax paper. Doesn't make sense to me.